Okay, let's get started. Hi, everyone. I'm Felicia Kelly, Project and Evaluation Director at California Humanities. If I'm not visible to you, I just want to let you know that I'm a white woman with brown eyes, short gray-brown hair, beige skin, and more than a few laugh lines. Today, I'm wearing a navy blue top with white embroidery and glasses. California Humanities is an independent nonprofit partner of the National Endowment for the Humanities. For over 45 years, we've made grants and developed programs and initiatives that have made the humanities more relevant and meaningful for all Californians. We're very glad to have you join us here today for our all welcome Best Practices for Increasing Accessibility session. This is the fourth event in Tools of the Trade, a practical series for humanities programmers, a new program of ours which aims to strengthen and rebuild our field in the wake of the pandemic. We hope you'll come back and join us in the coming months as we explore other topics of interest, such as raising the visibility of your work with media and decision makers and reaching new and underserved audiences. Now I'm delighted to introduce Dr. Kienzle Davis-Hayes, a valued member of our humanities community and a former California Humanities Board member who will moderate today's discussion. Kienzle is a professor of US history at California Baptist University in Riverside, where she teaches a variety of topics from the colonial period through the Cold War, including African-American civil rights history. Kienzle is also the academic in residence at the Women's Empowerment Foundation, which educates women on topics including body image, women's rights, and international women's issues. Her research and lecturing have taken her across the country and around the world, and she's currently working on a book about the history of Black women on television during the civil rights era. Kienzle has a strong interest in and a deep commitment to making the humanities, both in the classroom and in the public realm, more inclusive and accessible for everyone. So thank you for being with us today, Kienzle, and over to you.
Thank you so much, Felicia. It's always an honor to work with California Humanities. And in this process, it's been an honor to meet all of the incredible panelists that I will introduce to you today. For those of you who cannot see me, I am a brown-skinned woman with huge leontine hair today because that was what I was feeling today. I have on a black blouse, a gold necklace, and a cream-colored vest. I also wear black glasses. Our topic today is accessibility. How can we make the programs and activities we offer the public more engaging, inviting, and relevant to people of all abilities? When I first talked to Felicia about this program, I wasn't exactly sure where I fit as a university professor, but then very quickly it dawned on me that as an educator, we are always, as a community, seeking avenues to make our pedagogy more accessible. Gratefully, our student body has become more and more diverse just nationwide as a result of so many social breakthroughs, and we have to think every single day how we can make our lectures and our lessons accessible to all of our students. And so in an informal way, in a way that I've never thought about before considering this panel, accessibility is always on my mind. And clearly it is in tandem with an ongoing search in parallel with that of museums, libraries, and cultural organizations. And this is a great day. We're here today to learn from the experience of the team that organized the Art of Disability Culture, a multifaceted program that encompassed physical and online exhibits, as well as a rich series of public programs at the Palo Alto Arts Center last fall. We are so grateful to them for their willingness to share their experience and what they've learned through this program with all of us. And now I am going to introduce our very illustrious and extraordinarily valued panel. First, we have Karen Kienzle, who is the director of the Palo Alto Arts Center, where she oversees exhibitions, classes, and public programs for more than 150,000 community members annually. She is also a lecturer in museum studies at San Francisco State University, a peer reviewer for both the Institute of Museum and Library Services and the American Alliance of Museums Museum Assessment Program. Welcome, Karen. I would also like to introduce to all of you Fran Osborne. She is an independent curator and design consultant with expertise in the creation of accessible exhibitions and spaces. In the Bay Area, she curated the exhibits Changemakers, Bay Area Disability Pride at San Mateo and San Francisco Public Libraries, as well as Display, a disability takeover at Soma Arts in San Francisco, and Patient No More in Berkeley and San Francisco, about a historic disability rights sit-in and victory in 1977. Next, we have Eimear Picardo. Wave, Eimear. She is the marketing coordinator at the Palo Alto Arts Center. She has played a central role in developing and implementing strategies to increase accessibility at the Arts Center, including an exhibition design, content creation, social media, and events. Eimear is also an experienced journalist and editor and worked for many years at the Irish Times in Dublin, Ireland. And finally, we have Maia Scott. Maia teaches accessible arts for City College of San Francisco, acts as an adult program coordinator for the Lighthouse for the Blind and Visually Impaired, and enjoys sharing labyrinth experiences as a certified labyrinth facilitator. Maia's art appears in the Palo Alto Arts Center's The Art of Disability Culture in the latter part of 2021. Her piece, Squared, hangs in the San Francisco Main Library Braille and Talking Book Center. Maia co-created and wrote the guidebook for a tactile labyrinth collection, Finger Walks, produced by American Printing House for the Blind. Thank you so much, panel members, for being with us today. And this starts off with our question. Before you start, if you could describe yourself, of course, to our guests. I'm going to start with Karen. Karen, to start, please let us know a little bit about the art of disability culture and what led you to do this project.
Thank you so much, Kenya. I'm really happy to be here. I'm Karen Kienzle, the director of the Palo Alto Arts Center. I am a 50-year-old white woman with shoulder-length reddish-brown hair. I am wearing a very kind of bright 60s inspired floral dress with a kind of rust-colored jacket. I'm going to ask Kirsten if she might be able to share the first image, which will give you a sense of the Art of Disability Culture exhibition, and I can describe this. This is a panoramic photo of the installation of the Art of Disability Culture exhibition at the Palo Alto Arts Center. It includes a photo mural at the back right featuring photographer Anthony Tesler as a young man, and adjacent some of his framed photographs. A floor labyrinth installation by Maia Scott, who you'll hear from in a moment, is in the foreground, and mixed media paintings by Catherine Leche Chong are at the back. The Art of Disability Culture exhibition was guest curated by Fran Osborne, who you're going to hear from in a moment. The exhibition was on view from September 11th through December 11th at the Art Center. The exhibition featured work in a broad range of media by 20 artists who self-identify as having a disability. Now, how this exhibition came to be is a little bit of a long story, and I know that Maia and Fran have heard this a few times, so bear with me. But I do think it's kind of important to highlight, as I think it really showcases both the value of personal connections and challenges of COVID. And it also highlights why we wanted to do this show and how it came to be. So this year, the Art Center is celebrating its 50th anniversary, and I worked to organize a series of exhibitions that would showcase the power of art to promote social justice, inclusion, and healing. So one of our community partners, Magical Bridge, which is an accessible playground project started in Palo Alto, which is now expanded, had reached out to me because they were included in a traveling exhibition focused on accessible design that had been organized by the Cooper Hewitt National Design Museum and was traveling through the country. The curator had ties to Palo Alto, and we started developing plans to host this exhibition here in the winter of 2021. It was going to be a big stretch for us. It was going to be an expensive exhibition. It was going to be a labor-intensive exhibition. The board was really behind it and thought we could do it. And the staff were excited about the content and really liked the focus on accessibility, but they were concerned that the exhibition didn't include enough art. So we started looking at complementing the exhibition with an art component. And I reached out to my friend and colleague, Lisa Erickson, who is the former accessibility coordinator at the Junior Museum and Zoo. And she suggested Fran as a guest curator to do the companion art component for the exhibition. So fast forward to 2020 and COVID lockdown, and you can imagine that we were not in a position to take a big traveling show. Thankfully, we had not signed a contract. So we basically kind of talked to the Cooper Hewitt about not doing the huge accessibility design exhibition. But I asked Fran if we could look at delaying her exhibition to the fall of 2021 and if she could use the whole gallery. And that is how the exhibition began. And we partnered with numerous organizations on the exhibition and programs, including Ability Path, Vista Center for the Blind, the College of Adaptive Arts, and Magical Bridge. And accessibility features in the exhibition included QR codes that were linked to visual descriptions. You'll hear about that shortly, Braille labels, and social narratives for visitors that were accessible on our website. And if I could just show you the next image. This is an image of the interior of the gallery during our Community Day event. And on the right, there is an Asian American man standing with a cane, wearing a hat and a face mask. And on the left, there's a woman visitor standing with white hair next to a man sitting on a scooter with baseball hat. And in the middle of the space, there's a woman in a wheelchair with a guide dog, and then a standing ASL interpreter next to Fran, who is starting a walkthrough. So the programs in conjunction with the show included this Community Day, which was offered in a hybrid fashion. Friday night at the Art Center opening celebration, which included hands-on art making with an Ability Path artist, performances, a specialty cocktail named by Maia called the Reasonable Accommodation, which was endlessly customizable. We also hosted Free Community Day, the Free Community Day event that featured hands-on art making with one of the artists in the exhibition, Mathis Lamb, performances, Mozzaria, the deaf-owned Neapolitan pizza cart. And then we also offered a digital workshop with artist Sky Kubakub in connection with Creativity Explored and the Museum of Craft and Design. So we had goals for the exhibition that were audience goals, and then we also had institutional goals, and I'm happy to talk more of that. About that as we kind of go forward. I don't want to take up all the time, but I did want to mention that throughout our planning, we were really looking at not only having the exhibition, but programming being accessible and inclusive. And hybrid programs allowed the participation of virtual and in-person audiences. And ASL interpretation and captioning made the programs accessible to a wide range of audiences. So that hopefully introduces the show a little bit for everyone.
That's incredible, Karen. Thank you so much. And that takes us to Maia, who was featured in this show. Maia, as a visually impaired artist, can you speak about the idea of nothing about us without us?
Most certainly. It's a very powerful phrase that you'll encounter thrown around, especially in the disability community, but I think really applies to any subculture that you might be working with. And Karen and Fran made a very concerted effort to work with the artists with disabilities, to work with us along the way, along the creation of this exhibition, to find out what worked for us, what kind of accessibility accommodations might work well for our work. We got to record our audio descriptions. Many of us did it in our own voice where we wrote them. which is a real treat. We, had a lot of just general public enjoying those as well. And even after the exhibition closed, PAAC created an advisory committee of people with disabilities, many of whom were in the art of disability culture, to continue exploring and sharing ideas around maintaining accessible features in forthcoming shows, and share ideas about incorporating artists, teaching artists with disabilities and other disability connections into the community.
Thank you so much, Maya. Just really quickly, it seems that Karen put into the chat for future reference some of the goals that were established for the exhibition for audiences. So maybe a little later, because our panelists are sharing their experiences. But thank you so much. That's a really wonderful resource for everyone to be able to access at some point. But now this brings us to Fran. Hello, Fran. Fran, I have a multi-layered question for you. You've had a lot of experience in the field of exhibit design, and specifically with designing exhibits that are accessible to everyone. So my first question is, what is your philosophy about this? But then my second question is, as the curator, what kinds of accessibility features do you typically incorporate in the exhibit, as well as other public programs for this project?
Great. Thank you, Kenya. I better do a description of myself before I forget. So I'm an older white woman wearing glasses and a very snug black and white check scarf because it's very cold where I am. Yes, I'll try and pack in as much as I can in a short space of time. But well, there are lots of theories about inclusivity and accessible design. There's universal design and inclusive design. And I try not to get too bogged down in what it is that I'm doing. And I try and center the disability community and consult with them as much as possible. So I probably do have some philosophy, but I don't have anything written down or formulated into a theory. But there is a lot of research out there that people can consult if they do a search. I basically come from the social model of disability, which means that it's the environment that creates the disability rather than the person themselves. So the medical model very much reduces people to a kind of problem situation or a diagnosis that has to be solved. And so because of my exposure to the very powerful and activist Bay Area disability community, I'm very aware that they are people first and foremost. And so that is always at the center of what I do. It's also very easy to get hung up on compliance with things like building codes when you're thinking about accessibility. But I've learned that it's actually more of a creative practice. And while you can't be accessible for every single person or every kind of combination of disability that you might encounter, you can certainly do all kinds of things that might not cost as much as you think. So over time, I've learned that things like audio description of artworks is something that's very, very useful to blind and visually impaired people. And we made them kind of unique, I think, in this show by having as many of the artists record their own audio description as we could, which I think was a bit of a breakthrough. So I don't usually like to sort of crow about things, but I think it was a really interesting departure and people liked the intimacy that that created. As Karen said, we also had Braille guides. So we also translated the audio description into Braille as well as the label so that deaf-blind visitors could get both. And what you're always trying to do is create an equivalent experience for people. So that is what you're aiming for. And we also had a very inclusive framework for the artists that we included in the show. So we had people with cognitive disabilities too. So from the programs like Creativity Explored and NIAD, we very much included people with cognitive disabilities. We also had benches and resting places and spaces where people could take a rest. And that's still something that everybody always asks for. And it seems to be the hardest thing to kind of actually make into reality, because there's so much resistance to it from design teams. But the Palo Alto Arts Center were fantastic. And we actually had benches and chairs. Just coming back to the Braille before I forget, it's a really important thing to have, because it's often how blind or visually impaired people can learn spelling and punctuation that they might not get from just audio materials alone. So I think it's really important to try and keep Braille going as much as possible. And we also had conversations about language too. So for instance, there are some, depending on how you identify, words like differently abled or phrases like differently abled can be red flags to some of the more activist end of the disability community, whereas, you know, they don't necessarily trigger other people. So I think having conversations about appropriate language and what it can achieve is a really valuable part of the process too. But I know that we're short of time, so that's all I'm going to say for that segment. So thank you very much.
That was incredible, Fran. Thank you so much. That brings us to Eimear. You worked on the digital aspects of this. So if you could speak about the digital aspect of creating these programs, and what kinds of accessibility measures did you build into the exhibit and public programs?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I'll just do a brief description of myself before I jump into the answer. I'm an early 40s white woman with blue eyes, very long brown hair. Today I'm wearing a burgundy sweater, and my background is blurred, so you don't see much of my background. So yeah, coming to the question. So when it came to this exhibition, it was really, I think it was a great kind of impetus for us to kind of develop strategies that we now use. You know, we are also using in our current exhibition, Creative Attention. And I think, you know, we kind of was thinking about it in three ways. Firstly, how to make the exhibition, like the on-site experience of the exhibition, more accessible, and then also the offering like an online kind of experience of the exhibition, and then thirdly, you know, how to make our public events more accessible and inclusive. And so as Fran has touched on already, one of the big things that we implemented with this exhibition was QR codes that are basically, there were QR codes beside every label for every artwork that people could scan, and then it would bring you to, and it would automatically play an audio description, as Fran mentioned, like in most cases recorded by the artists themselves. This was something that, you know, we kind of figured out how to do it. It took a bit of figuring out, you know, developing the process, and I'm not going to go into the full details of the step-by-step process, but I've created a document that we'll share after the webinar, which I can help people if they choose to implement it themselves. And like, there's no one particular way to do it, but, you know, this is the process that we found works for us. And it's, you know, once we figured out the process, I think it's important to emphasize that it's, as Fran also mentioned, it's pretty affordable, you know, like there, you know, it's not something that would be cost prohibitive at all. And it's a great like thing to offer, you know, in our exhibitions. And as I mentioned, we also included it, you know, in our current exhibition, Creative Attention. And it is still a process. We're working on developing a visual description guide for future exhibiting artists, so that, like as Fran mentioned, having the artists record the visual descriptions themselves is a really nice kind of personal thing for people to hear them describe their own artwork. So you know, that's something that we're developing, you know, going forward. So, you know, it is a process, but really want to point people to the instructions that I will be shared after it, because I know time-wise we don't have time to go into all the full nitty-gritty of that. Then in terms of the online resources, we created an exhibition website, basically with a page dedicated, an overview of the exhibition, and then a page dedicated to each artist in the exhibition, which included images of their artwork, which all had alt text, which is basically like a kind of a short visual description of the work embedded kind of in the image for screen readers. And then also embedded the audio descriptions in each page as well, so that people could also access it there on the website. The other, and then, so basically this was to give people who may not be able to attend the exhibition on site a kind of an experience of the exhibition in an online format. And we also had like a video with Fran of an exhibition walkthrough, kind of to give people a kind of an overview of the exhibition, with that, which included like perfected captions, which we'll touch on at a later point. But also we had, as Karen mentioned, with our events, we offered a hybrid program, so that again, I think one of the things about the pandemic was a lot of things moved online, and there's I think that was something that actually was a benefit to a lot of people with disabilities who in the past may not have been able to attend things like in person. So I think it's really important for institutions to continue offering online components. And with the Art Center, we have made a commitment to continue with our artist talks, having them as online events, so that they're more accessible and inclusive, that people can attend them. When it comes to the events themselves, then it's important to what online events and hybrid events to think about like how to make them more accessible. So as we have today, having an ASL interpreter and offering, if possible, live human captioning. And these are things that there are some things that you can do very in a less expensive way, but when you're planning an event, to kind of budget in early on and plan for the ASL interpreter and the captioning. You can also, in a more affordable way, have automated captioning services, which are a step up from the Zoom type, standard, captioning option, but it's an affordable option. So we've signed up to a service called otter.ai that offers that, but there are also lots of other options which we include in our resource list, which we'll share after. So, these are just some of the things that we've implemented for this exhibition, but I think the initial kind of research and looking into it was one thing, but now we have these processes bedded in that we can kind of continue doing going forward with all our exhibitions and programs. So yeah.
Thank you so much, Eimear. This next question is for Maia. And just really quickly, I want to say, listening to all of you, this exhibit sounds so, I was trying to find the word I was looking for, and the word is intentional. It's just so very thoughtful about the way that the art is displayed and who the audiences are going to be and what their needs are going to be and what their concerns are going to be. And since we're having a forum like this, it's clear that so many spaces are not intentional, are not thoughtful. And so my question for you, Maia, was as one of their featured artists, what was it like to participate in this project? What was this experience like for you as an artist?
Wow. I feel, well, first of all, I'm being a very bad blind person and I didn't do my description. So here it comes, quick and fast here. I'm identify as a fat white woman with my kind of auburn hair scraped into a messy bun, wearing a black and white patchwork tunic, and not on camera is my golden retriever guide dog in harness. So I felt very heard on many levels. I felt very empowered because I felt welcome to see the, how do I put this? This is a tough one. I felt like I belonged in the space. It wasn't just about my art. It was about me as a person. It was about our subculture, the disability culture, both showing and attending. And, just feeling the power that 1 in 4 of us in this world have a disability, and that the space was open to 1 in 4 of us, plus all the others that benefit from, who don't ID as disabled, who benefit from all the things that are happening, that are benefiting from maybe sitting down with large print labels to read easier, who are enjoying the artists' voices. So there was a really just a deep sense of body positivity and empowerment. I could keep ranting for another 3 hours about how amazing the experience was, but let's go on.
Thank you so much for that. It's not ranting. I think that we are all really appreciative about your perspective. And I just have to say that I was so very moved by your phrase that you felt heard, right? I think that's what all of us want in this life. And so, congratulations on having such a full experience that gave you, your full humanity as an artist and as a professional. And that does bring us back to Fran, who curated this. I don't know if I missed it, just as a tiny little detail. How many artists in total participated in this project, and how did you ultimately identify these artists to work with?
Thank you. Yeah, there were 20 artists in the show. But we could have had more, there's no shortage of disabled artists out there. And some people clearly identify as having a disability, some people do not. But the focus of the show was disability. So I was on the lookout for people who had disability content in the work. So you don't always kind of come across that, or sometimes there are disability shows, but they can be very academic. And so this was designed to be inclusive for everybody, and not educational as such, but a sort of window into a kind of intimate space where it was okay to stare and to really spend time with these images of disability and disabled people. So, for instance, one of the artists, Bill Bruckner, has a self-portrait in the show, and he has a short left arm and just a couple of fingers on the right, but he's a painter and had done this really wonderful self-portrait that kind of invites you to stare and look at it, but is not judgmental in any way. And I think, there are so many questions people have about being disabled and the disability world. And so we wanted to create the space where it was sort of safe for all kinds of artists and all kinds of experience. And I'm always on the lookout for work that references disability in some way. So in addition to the people that I knew already, so Maia I knew because she had sort of doorstepped me at a previous exhibition and asked if she could do a performance at the opening event. And I was just so delighted that anybody would want to do that I've known her since then. Because disability is sometimes a hard sell and people misinterpret what it is. You can kind of go down the pity route and all the awful kind of do-gooderism kind of realm of it. And so Maia was very much in your face, kind of loud and proud and representing disability pride. I feel like I'm going off track a bit here, but we also, the other thing that I'm really pleased about, we had a lot of blind artists in the show, and that wasn't really by design. It was more, it just kind of unfolded in that way. So the Art Center has a very robust ceramics program. And so they knew about a guy called Don Katz, who's in LA, who's a blind potter. So, we definitely wanted to include him in the show too. Because when you think about a blind artist, people get some kind of cognitive dissonance already when you say that. They're sort of scrambling around trying to understand what it means. And so it was a great opportunity to explain that blind and visually impaired people have a whole range of experiences and a whole range of sight capability. So it's not that blind people just live in this dark world. It can be very, very varied. So there were lots of ways like that we were able to kind of, I mean, it's really hard to summarize what the show is because I feel like we're just scraping the surface here of the content that was in the show. But yeah, does that answer the question? There was the other thing is that there's a kind of amazing network as well. So the disability community is a kind of ecosystem, and there's an organization called Diversability in San Francisco, and they told me about Rachel Ungara, whose work really centers around invisible disabilities and her experience of chronic illness. And that's something that you don't often see, and it's also really hard to kind of represent that. So I think anybody looking in their local community will find all kinds of people doing all kinds of work. It's just, you know, tapping into those networks and asking questions, because we're really keen that people find their own way of tackling accessibility. We're not necessarily saying like, this is how you should do it. This is how it manifested in this exhibition for this community.
That's incredible. I didn't realize it was 20 artists. So it's just deep and wide, and it seems to cover the gamut. So kudos, well done. This is for Karen. What about the public program providers? Can you tell us who you worked with and how you connected with them?
Yeah, first, I should mention that Fran is incredibly collaborative, and we have a really collaborative work culture here at the Arts Center. And so it really integrated successfully with how we work. And so she had lots of ideas and helped to work with us on programming for the show. And I will say that many of the artists in the exhibition were part of the programming for the exhibition. So of course, Maia did that incredible for Labyrinth, but she also did a performance for our community day. Mathis Lamb, who was one of the artists in the exhibition, did hands-on art activities. But the other thing that we did was really leverage our community partners, Ability Path in Palo Alto, Magical Bridge in Palo Alto, organizations that work with people with a wide range of abilities. They were great to connect with around programming and also supporting outreach, which will kind of lead into the next part of our conversation.
Thank you so much. Something that we know public humanities providers are always concerned about is how to secure the resources needed to implement a good project, as well as how to reach an audience. So I'm actually going to ask you, Karen, another question, if you don't mind. How are you able to develop the funding needed to support the kinds of accessibility measures you incorporated into the exhibits and programs? And did doing this project open up any new sources of funding for you?
Yeah, I will say that, you know, some of the challenges around this project were really kind of delays and uncertainties related to COVID. And I think that this was a really inherently fundable project, but unfortunately, because of building closures and lack of confidence in our ability to open to the public, it just delayed our ability to find funding. I want to acknowledge that California Humanities was a supporter of this initiative, and we're very grateful for their support. We did have some existing funding that we were able to kind of reallocate to this project. So we had received an IMLS, an Institute of Museum and Library Services CARES grant to support building our capacity around digital programs. We had to extend that grant. It was actually a collaboration with the Palo Alto Library and the Palo Alto Junior Museum and Zoo. And we talked to the funders about, you know, could we allocate some of these resources towards hybrid programs now that we're in recovery recovery. So that was a really wonderful funding source that helped us with some of the kind of digital components to the support to make the hybrid program possible. We were able to engage Mid-Peninsula Media Center, who helped us in a lot of different ways. And then I will say that while this grant didn't necessarily support the exhibition itself, we did receive an Institute of Museum and Library Services American Rescue Fund grant that was really focused on leveraging the exhibition after the fact to support building capacity for inclusion at the Arts Center. So that has kind of supported us in being able to pay our advisory committee going forward, being able to bring in prime access consulting to do staff training around accessible design, inclusion, and also inclusive marketing. I will say we also received an individual gift to support the exhibition from a collector who collected the work of artists associated with NIAD, Creative Growth, and Creativity Explored, 3 organizations in the San Francisco Bay Area that support artists with intellectual disabilities who were featured prominently in the exhibition. And so we did get an individual donor a contribution to support the exhibition in that way.
Very nice. Yes, COVID has been a challenge in so many ways, but we all learned that we're creative in ways we didn't even know. Somehow we're all still here, right? Absolutely. This is to Eimear and Karen. How did you go about reaching people in the disability community to come to the exhibit? What special approaches did you use in outreach? And this is for Karen, and for Eimear in terms of social media marketing to augment your standard publicity approach and to draw audiences.
And I will say to start, and then I'll just let Eimear take over. Our community partnerships were really critical here. So we actually gathered an informal advisory group, had Fran talk about the exhibition. We continued to communicate with that group to let them know about the exhibition opening, to let them know about programs. We encouraged them to promote the programs and the exhibition in their communities. And then Eimear can talk a little bit more about some of the marketing too.
Yeah, so I can talk to you about how we changed our social media strategy to kind of make it more inclusive. Again, this was kind of the impetus was the exhibition, but it's what we've kind of implemented this and will continue going forward. So, you know, there are so many things in social media posts that you can that are very simple to implement if you just kind of even just know it. So for example, when you have hashtags, it's so really important to capitalize the first letter of every word in a hashtag so that screen readers can read them properly. And it's just these like little things that can make a huge difference. And you know, just kind of implementing these it can make a big difference. Another thing that we've kind of, you know, that we're conscious of is when you post something to not have too much text in an image. And if you ever do have text in the image, to always include the entire text that is in the image in the body text of your post. We also have alt text with every post. Every time we post, we have alt text, which is, as I mentioned before, a short description that's kind of like that kind of screen readers can then describe what the image is. And then we also, in the body text of every post, we have an image description as well. So these are just things that we have adopted in our social media and marketing strategy to make our social media posts more inclusive and accessible. Another thing that we do with our social media posts, any videos that we post, we include perfected captions. So, and you know, unfortunately, you can't upload perfected captions with Instagram, but like with Facebook and YouTube, you can upload a perfected caption file when you upload a video. And again, this took a little bit of figuring out for us, but it's something that we've implemented now, and we have a process that works. We use a otter.ai to create a kind of a caption file that we can then like edit as well and upload that with our videos. So these are just things in our communications that I think are really important and can be implemented with a bit of guidance. And one thing that Karen mentioned about the IMLS, the virtual programming grant, we did produce a virtual programming playbook, which goes into a lot of detail about how to produce virtual programs for your organization. And we have a chapter dedicated to accessibility. So it goes into a lot of detail of how you can, on any of these, on social media and on videos, how to make them more accessible. And we're sharing that resource after this webinar with you. So so they're kind of just strategies that we always use now with all of our social media campaigns. So.
Thank you guys so much. All right, before we go to our Q&A, I do want to ask kind of a final question. What advice do you have for your colleagues in our audience about how to try something similar at their institution or organizations? We just go around. Fran, do you want to start off?
I think be willing to make lots of mistakes and own up to it, and don't assume anything. And so test everything out with the local disability community, and always try and reach communities of color as well, because they are often doubly marginalized because of the way the world is. And so when you think about inclusion, really reach out to as many people as possible, but don't assume that you'll get it right first time. And it's like an ongoing journey as well. We're all still learning. And as you said earlier, intention is really important.
Absolutely, thank you. Maia?
With all of the amazing high-tech and low-tech accessibility features and programs and all that that you do, the most important thing to me is the human connection. I've walked into museums before and bumped my way around quietly and came back and said, hey, I'd like to talk to you about access. And they said, oh, we have that. And I didn't know. So having that person on the front line who knows the language and whatnot to speak to the disability community is really key. To have that welcoming person out there saying, here's what we have to offer. Let me know how I can help, if I can help. I think that's really huge. Even if it's, we have Braille signage, even if it's a simple thing, let me know it's there.
Wow. Yeah, I see that. Eimear?
Yeah, I think kind of echoing what the others have said. I think having, just the intention, at the start is a great start. And, there are plenty of things that you can implement that they don't have to be like super expensive. There's ways that you can do it in an affordable way. And like Fran mentioned, it is a process. It's a journey. We're still learning as we go, and updating and adapting our processes. But I think just having that the intention at the start is a great start. And just like experiment, try things. We also there's lots of different ways to do things, but it's a great, it's worth looking into it. And
Absolutely. And Karen?
Yeah, just want to reiterate what everyone else said, is it is indeed a process. I just would encourage organizations to pursue access. Even if you're a small organization, even if you have a limited budget, there's so many things that you can do. Fran and I just participated with Maia on a panel where we had a colleague from a very, very small historic house who talked about what they did to promote accessibility. They're all things we all can be doing work in this area and improving, and it is indeed a process. And the other piece I would say is partnerships are critical to all of our work now more than ever. And I think in this work, it's very important too, because we just relied on community partners to help us find all sorts of, whether it was program providers or technology assistants. So really encourage you to connect with organizations who are working with people with disabilities in your area to kind of supplement and augment your work.
And Karen, can you give us a final comment? I'm sorry, you just muted you. Sorry. Overall, how can you comment about how this experience impacted the PAAC?
Well, it's again an ongoing process. So, thanks to the IMLS American Rescue Plan grant, it's called Centering Access, we're able to continue this work. And we've continued with Braille labels, we're continuing with visual descriptions. We've been working with Prime Access Consulting. And so it's continuing, it's helping us to continue to do more in the area of access. We're starting to look at how we make our adult studio spaces more accessible as well. We just had a great session today with Prime Access Consulting, which got us to think about how do we turn our nursing nook actually into a kind of sensory retreat / nursing nook. So for our audiences who may be on the spectrum, who need a little space to have some quiet. And then the other thing I will just say is that, we've got this community of artists who participated in the art of disability culture, who continue to work with us in some ways. And some of them are on our advisory committee that we're paying. Maia actually was here on Sunday doing an art activity as part of our community day in conjunction with Creative Attention. And, I think it's just an important thing that we've talked about. Artists with disabilities are often interested in art, not just art by people with disabilities. So keeping these artists in the loop on projects we're doing at the Art Center, finding out ways we can continue to include them. It's just been really valuable, and it's made a huge impact on the organization and our staff.
Thank you. Before we go to the Q&A, I just want to say that you guys are incredible. And I have learned so much today about integrating accessibility into organizations and institutions that are public facing. And I just want to thank you so much for all of the work that you do, and just thank you so much about the passion that is clear. So 3 cheers. I'm so honored to have been here with all of you today. And that brings us to our audience Q&A. Kirsten, are you going to do the Q&A section?
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Kirsten Vega from California Humanities, and I'm just going to be here to convey audience questions to the panel. I'm a youngish woman with big red glasses covered in cat hair. And let's see, while questions are coming in, I thought we could start with a question for Fran. Fran, could you say a little bit about the exhibit you helped curate, Patient No More, which was supported back in the day by California Humanities?
Yeah, sure. I'm not sure how much time we have, because I could go on about that for a very long time. It was to commemorate the 25th anniversary of the ADA, but it was looking at a local San Francisco story, which is the 504 protest story that features in the film Crip Camp. But our project preceded Crip Camp, and it was the center of it were really these videos of many of the participants that we could find who are still around. Often they were very young when the occupation of the federal building happened, and their purpose was to get the regulations for Section 504 passed without any changes or any dilution. And this bunch of young people were successful in doing that. So it's a little known history. The exhibition is still traveling around the country. I think currently it's at the Museum on Main in Pleasanton, but there's also an online version of it too. I hope that's enough, but I could talk about it forever, so I'll better shut up now.
Okay, thanks so much, Fran. I just put a link to the Exhibit Envoy space for that exhibit if anyone is interested in renting it or learning more. Okay, question from the chat. Andy says, my organization is developing a VR museum and we're looking for ways to make it more accessible to all. Does anyone on the panel have experience making a VR experience more accessible?
I don't know. I think the jury is still out for a lot of people on VR. So I don't know if I could say anything that would be very useful. Maia, do you have any experience of VR?
No, I've only had the opportunity to play with one. I'm blanking on the name of it. It was from the UK. And they offered audio descriptions within the VR experience, which was quite engaging and beautiful to have that chance. I have a little functional sight, so I really enjoyed that kind of both and option. But other than that, no experience at all.
Stanford does have a virtual human interaction lab, and they've been doing a lot around VR. I don't know if that extends into accessibility, but that might be a place to start looking. But I'm sorry, I have no direct experience.
Thanks, everyone. And if we come across any other resources on VR, we'll add it to our resource list, which will be circulating early next week with the video recording of this event. Let's see. We've gotten some great comments in the Q&A just thanking the panel for your generosity and experience. We've also had some really important points made by some anonymous attendees about rates of disability in communities of color, and for LGBTQ people. So I encourage everyone to go and read those for some more information. Yeah, let's see. Another question is, will the transcript be available after the webinar? Yeah, we'll download the transcript, the video recording, and then the wonderful resource list that the panelists have put together early next week. So you can look out for that. Okay.
And I should just mention, I did put the goals that we had for the Art of Disability Culture in the chat. We did do a visitor survey, and then because we were the recipient of the California Humanities Quick Grant, we did the California Humanities Survey, we have results from both that we'll include in the resources that go out to everyone. If you're interested in the impact of the exhibition, there's some really wonderful visitor comments about the impact of the show that might be valuable for folks.
Lovely. Thank you so much, Karen. Okay, well, we're just coming on to 5 o'clock now, so I have some closing remarks. But before that, was there anything else anyone on the panel wanted to add that you didn't get a chance to say?
Just thank you for hearing us. I feel like a lot of times when we do create disability-focused exhibits or experiences, we often attract our own. So it's really important to be seen and heard by you guys who can extend the creative potential of inclusive and accessible programming to your communities to make this blossom even further. So thank you for hearing us.
Thanks, Maia. And thanks everyone for joining us today. We hope that what's been shared in this session will be useful for all of you in your work. And we'd also like to encourage humanities programmers in the audience to apply for grants at California Humanities if you're doing accessibility centered work. And we'll have some links in the chat to our Humanities for All projects. I'd also like to close by thanking our wonderful panelists, Fran, Eimear, Karen, Maia, and our moderator, Kienzle, as well as Emily Herrer, who has been signing for us during this program. Thank you so much, Emily. And to our crew behind the scenes, our president and CEO, Julie Fry, who's been so supportive, Felicia Kelly, who manages the Tools of the Trade series, and our operations manager, Beth Segura, who's been behind the scenes, and our communications team, Sheree Hill and Stephen Loskatoff. Today's program is part of a series called Tools of the Trade, supported by the American Rescue Plan, which is funded by the National Endowment for the Humanities. The goal of this series is to strengthen our statewide community of public humanities practitioners and problem solve together in the wake of COVID. We do have another one of these coming up June 16th. It's called Reaching New and Underrepresented Audiences, and you can register at the link in the chat. Please be sure to let us know what you thought of today's program and keep an eye out in your inboxes for the recording. So thanks so much, everyone. Please keep in touch and take care and stay safe.